Well, hello there, everybody. It's good to see everybody. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. And I hope if you are struggling on Father's Day for whatever reason, that you have people around to support and love on you. Hope you're all doing well out there. Looking forward to having this conversation. It's the last one we're going to do before the Colorado Trail through hiking season. So this will likely be the last live cast we do, unless I end up doing one from the trail, which who knows, right? But I see a lot of friendly faces there in the audience there. I see Ghost Meal from Everyday Backpackers in the group. We've got Jerry at Tangent Trails, just finished up a spectacular trip all over the Pisgah National Forest. I got to meet him in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And then he is getting ready to hike the Lone Star Trail just as soon as the temps out there in Texas drop below 3,000 degrees. We'll see how that goes. We've got All Terrain Coffee and Camping in the group. He just got one let me sound like I'm from the 1940s. He got a humdinger of a coffee grinder. So excited to see the coffee that you're putting together there, and just really excited for this conversation. So let's talk a little bit about what we're doing here. Well, let's actually go ahead and bring in our guest here. So we have, if you watched one of my first live streams here, you will know that there was one time when I said, we have Katarisa here asking a question, and it turned out that it was Kate Risa. And that was a middle name. And so this is Kate J here, and she is taking off on the Colorado Trail in not too many days at all. And she has been piecing together a really decent gear setup for the Colorado Trail and getting ready for that. And we started a conversation on Instagram, Kate, and you had mentioned, I'm at about 35 pounds with 5 days of food and 2 liters of water, which is pretty typical. So we're going to talk about some places where maybe you can take down some weight, maybe you can add some weight or switch some things out, or places where if you are including weight, that bear canister, we're going to talk about why that's worth it for a lot of people and why that makes a lot of sense. So Kate, tell us a little bit about your experience with the outdoors. I know you're a trail runner, and that you mentioned you live in the sort of northern Arizona area, which is a little bit smoky, but certainly an outdoorsy person's paradise, right? So tell us a little bit about your experience outdoors and what made you decide to take on the Colorado Trail this year.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for having me on this Snack Box. This YouTube channel has been so instrumental in helping me get ready. So it's awesome to be a part of it here today. So I got into trail running and backpacking once I moved out from New York to Flagstaff, Arizona, and that was about 10 years ago. This is Flagstaff's known for trail running. It's known we have so much trail access around here. I really, 10 years ago started with the trail running and just through meeting new friends out here, got into backpacking. Mostly it's been a lot of weekend trips for the backpacking. Actually, 7 years ago today, it keeps popping up on my Facebook feed. I was on the PCT. And so that has been my biggest trip to date. And that was 8 days in Oregon.
Okay.
And so that's kind of my experience, is mostly just trail running. I do ultra marathons, so that's anything over 26 miles. So it's a lot of time out on trail, but certainly not as much gear and logistics as the through hiking. So this will be my first through hike.
Okay, great. And it's, it all kind of starts that way for a lot of people, where you end up on trail for a little bit and you start getting into it. And then it kind of, especially I would assume, and I'm probably making a lot of assumptions here, if you're an ultra runner, when you start diving into something, you dive deep and quick, right? And kind of get really head over, like head first into these big monumental sort of adventures. For those of you who don't know, this is that Flagstaff area is really well known for a lot of Olympic training for a lot of different reasons. One, because it's really sunny and clear, but also it's at elevation. So it's at about 7,500 feet, somewhere 7,800 feet.
700.
Mm-hmm. There we go. Yeah. So it's way up in elevation. So for a lot of people trying to do endurance training with lower levels of oxygen and then go back down. So a lot of cyclists go up there. It's actually, in some respects, when you drive there, it's really frustrating because of all the cyclists on the side of the road, because they're just training and getting ready. But it is very much an underrated outdoorsy city. And it's a hidden gem for a lot of people who like towns like Denver, Salt Lake City, Gunnison, Salida, that sort of thing. So very much pretty typical sort of entry point for people is doing a bigger hike where you're surrounded, or maybe you're seeing the through hikers, and so if you're on the PCT, you may be seeing a lot of those people kind of passing by and start getting that kind of that wanderlust, right? Like, I want to be there, I want to be doing that, and so for sure that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of, in some respects, kind of, I mean, it hooked me in a lot of respects because I was doing the lashing, what they call long ass section hiking of the Colorado Trail. So I'd go out for about a week, 10 days, and I'd meet up and hike with a bunch of people who were in the middle of hikes or ending hikes. And I always wanted to keep going. So that's when I really kind of got into it. So what's interesting here, so let's talk a little bit about gear. And so we were talking before we came on the live stream here, we were talking about how a lot of the decisions can be really challenging and complicated, but also what we want to talk about is the sort of the way that we go about thinking about gear and making those additions. So I'm hoping first, before we really start showing the gear and digging into specifics, do you have some sort of approach when you're deciding on a piece of gear? So for those of you who are watching right now, a couple of things to know is that Kate's setup has plenty of items that are affordable, sort of budget items, has plenty of items that are the higher end sort of backpacks. We've got a hyperlight mountain gear backpack. So there's certainly a way of thinking that isn't, it's for when we look over this list, the philosophy is not let's go buy the most expensive thing, but it's also not let's go buy the cheapest thing or the lightest thing, that there's something else going on there. So I'm hoping that you can shed some light on sort of the mentality you had going into REI or those outdoor stores, whichever ones you were buying from or online or whatever. What was your thinking when you were putting this together?
Yeah, so I guess there were a couple things that were on top of my brain when I was thinking about my gear. And so the first thing was, since I'm newish, well, I am new to through hiking, comfort and feeling safe were two important things for me. I don't have a lot of experience. And from what I've heard, people kind of are able to make big changes once they have a ton of experience and then they know what works and what doesn't. So safety and comfort is important to me. Another thing I was thinking about, and that's kind of why I wanted to go on the lighter side of things, is because I like to move fast and I like to have long days. And I think that's that trail running mentality, but I want to log a lot of miles per day. And so I think that's why I tended to go lighter with some things. So hopefully that will be in my advantage for a more comfortable long haul.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes perfect sense. So when we're looking over this, doing bigger miles certainly possible. For what it's worth, I mean, one of the things we talked about earlier was that, when I started, I had a gear setup that was somewhere. I maybe didn't even mention this, but when I did the collegiate loop, I averaged 20 miles a day, and I had a pack that was an external frame that must have been somewhere in the ballpark of about 50 pounds. So it is possible. It wasn't super fun, and the story I always tell is it's kind of gross, but I could hear the blisters sloshing by the time I finished because I was so sore. But it is doable with heavier packs. So the good news too for everybody out there is that what I want to highlight about your comment there is that you understood that this wasn't the end point specifically because you were thinking through, where does my gear meet where I am currently as a hiker, not where I want to go. And so knowing that, and this is a really important mentality for anybody who's thinking about a through hike or just getting into hiking in general, never approach a piece of gear as the end all be all, that this is where you're stopping. Now, sometimes you get lucky and you find a piece of gear and you think this is the tent I'm going to use forever. This is it. I figured it out. But for most of us, we're thinking, where do we go from here? Where do we make those changes? So when we talk about this gear, I think that'll be a really interesting element here because I've done the CT or stretches of the CT with, I did it with a 2-person copper spur, which is like a freestanding 2-person tent. I did it with a poncho tarp. Actually, my 250 miles of the trail in 2020 was just this guy here, and it's a poncho and you stake it in as a tarp. So you use it as a poncho when it's raining, and it was miserable, but I did it, right? So I did 250 miles with this, and then I'm back on a sort of a full tent. So anyway, all that being said, thinking through this gear and where it meets you as in your comfort level and what makes you feel safe. And that was another thing that you mentioned, there's comfort and safety. And so when you're thinking of comfort and safety, it sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're saying that almost like almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs in some way. I know that might not be the right term or might have been debunked, but basically, until you have that safety, you can't feel comfortable. And so the safety is really priority one, and it's not separable from the idea of comfort, that they're really sort of essential foundations for that. Does that all sound in keeping with what we're dealing with here?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you said that you camp with the tarp, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so brave because I'm definitely not there yet to just be camping under a tarp. So,
Yeah, and it was one of the things that it's certainly something that the first night or so I didn't feel great with it. But all the same, it was also one of the things where, kind of to your point, when you get some more experience, you actually start figuring out. For me, I found out that I loved having the tent open, right? So I would leave the tent open so I could see the stars at night or sleep without the bug net or the brain fly. And then once I figured that out, then I'm like, why am I carrying this big heavy thing? And it's cold enough in Colorado. I'm not going to see any bugs really at night. So why am I carrying all this when I know that I could sleep there? But that took a long time. I mean, it really did take years to get to that point. And it also had an intermediate step where actually in the chat there, Everyday Backpacker has my Deschutes Plus right now. And it's a tent that doesn't have a floor. Right. And so it's got a bug net it's got the tarp part that's sort of full 360, and it's got a bug net that comes down on the bottom but no floor. And so there's this sort of staging process getting there, but eventually I figured out that there were other pieces of gear that would be more comfortable, maybe even lighter. So we'll talk about those when we get to them. But it's in a state of evolution, and that evolution is made possible by experience and knowing what you like and what you don't like. So very much, I think this will be the kind of conversation that anybody in the audience there will be able to relate to, whether or not you're into the super ultralight or if you're looking for something a little more comfortable, etc. So cool. Let me show everybody here. I think people are going to be real excited about this. We've got Salmon Outdoors here, says Gear Talk is his favorite, and he spells it the Canadian way because he sure as heck is. And here we go. So this is let's actually start with your second one here. This is your setup here. Most importantly, what kind of dog do we have here tucked away in the corner?
That's right. Little Vern made it into the gear shot. He's like a little husky healer mix.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Good for an outdoorsy sort of hiking dog for sure. So here we're getting just a good look at everything. So everybody in the audience there, take a close look at this and see if there's anything. We're going to be asking questions or asking you to kind of weigh in on what you're thinking. And I will show the gear list, the full gear list here. And then we also have the toiletries and the electronics, right? So we've got a second light here that we're going to talk about at some point. We've got the GPS. We've also got here we've got the deuce of spades, the trowel, Kula cloth. We've got deodorant and a razor. And then, of course, sunscreen, etc. So we've got lots of stuff here that we can certainly dive in and talk about. And then here, let's. How do you think we should proceed? So let me ask you this: do you want to start with maybe the big three, and let's just talk over those, and then work our way through some of the smaller items there as well?
That sounds great.
Okay, so talk us through what's your tent situation. What are we dealing with there?
Okay, so I went with 6 Moon Design, the Lunar Solo. Lunar Solo. And so I actually heard that here on one of these chats. I didn't know about it before. And so I was looking at a Big Agnes before. I think it was the Copper Spur, maybe a one person. And so I was kind of, my husband and I have a Big Agnes right now, a 2-person. And so I'm familiar with that brand. But when I heard that on this chat, the 6 Moon Design, I went to their website and then just hit the internet hard and was looking at reviews for many, many, many hours. And so I don't know. I kind of went with it. I thought it got pretty good reviews. It was lightweight. I like that there was a lot of ventilation to it, but I was still pretty covered, and safety, that's important to me. I want to feel like I'm secure in a little, in a full tent. And this is my first tent that I'm using that I can use my hiking pole with it.
That's right. Yeah. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Lunar Solo, this one is actually kind of it's a variation in some respects of the Deschutes that I was mentioning there, where it's fully enclosed. It's a single, right, trekking pole.
Yeah.
So single trekking pole. They have the other one that takes 2. I believe that's the Skyscape Trekker. takes two, but this is the one that takes one. It does have a good vestibule with it, and it has bug netting. And of course, at 26 ounces, and at 26 ounces for a tent that falls in that $200 price range, give or take a little bit, it's great. I think that's a really great choice. It's also nice in that respect. Let me show you all here that this is my tent that I'm taking this year. Should I be able to go? There's some things maybe will impact that, but we'll see how that goes. But I've got the Gossamer gear, the one. But what's nice about these tents, so these trekking pole tents, for me is not so much the weight, although the weight is an advantage. This one's about 23 ounces with the full setup, but it's how small it can fit, which allows you to shrink other stuff and to fit other stuff in your pack. So I think you made a great choice with that tent there. And anybody who's used a Six Moon Designs tent, including Salmon used one, they're great. Especially, I don't know your height, Kate, but they're especially good if you are under about 6'1". Then they're really terrific tents for that. So I think that's a dynamite choice there as well.
Yeah, it's super roomy. Like I realize that like there's definitely a lot of room. I'm 5'8", and so
Okay.
I guess I'm a little bit taller, and I definitely have a lot of room in there.
Yeah, and it has a sort of kind of the footprint of it where you can sleep inside is sort of shaped like a baseball home base is probably the best way to describe it. So it's kind of like a rectangle with a triangle on the side. So almost like a Superman shield turned upside down, if you will. So it's kind of a 1.5 person tent where you've got plenty of space for stuff that you need to keep inside your tent. I think you made a great choice with that one. I am curious about the choice to go with a 15-degree sleeping bag. So do you sleep cold? Is that what do you think about that? And in the chat, what do you think about the 15-degree bag? What's your thought there?
Okay, so I sleep very cold.
Okay.
I just run cold all the time. Like my
Sure.
hands are always, my feet are always freezing. So that was important to me when I was looking at, what I was going to use for sleeping. And so, to be honest, I thought I would be taking a quilt.
Okay.
And I know we're going to talk about this a little later, so maybe I should go into this now.
You dive right in.
At first, I thought I was going to take the quilt, but I ended up going with the Magma. It's REI brand sleeping bag, 15-degree. I probably would have went with a 0 degree just because I'm so cold all the time. But this was what was at REI, and it got pretty good reviews. And it's a lot lighter weight than my other sleeping bag I had previously. So that was kind of my decision to go with this bag.
Okay. Yeah, I think it makes sense, especially if you know that you run cold. I think that there are certainly spots on the trail where, for many people, a 15-degree bag will be sufficient. I go the opposite direction where I tend to run hot. So last year I went with a 32-degree quilt. And then in years past, I've gone with upwards of even a 45-degree quilt, but that's probably pretty atypical. And it required me to take an Nalgene to boil water and make sure I had that sort of hot water pouch with it. But in theory, though, Salmon talks about how having the sleeping bag liner might be overkill. I think depending on how you feel about that, that's also possible, especially with that 8 ounces. We're talking half a pound, which what I would do in that case is I would think through whether or not, and again, these are all budgetary considerations, but thinking through whether or not that really is something that you're absolutely going to need, or in the future, it might be worth trying to find a 15-degree bag that's lighter or a 0-degree bag that's lighter and allows you to lose that 8.5 ounces for the liner, the reactor. So a lot of different options there. But again, and I want to pause. Let me pause for a minute. I meant to say this part. So here's the thing, everybody. I want to be real clear about this. This setup will absolutely work perfectly. It is a great setup. So when we are talking about this, the nature of the conversation is going to sound like I'm saying change these things. The reality is that this setup has already been so thoughtfully curated that when we're talking about these ideas, these are just ideas, and they're really just meant for you all who are watching to think of to see the way mindsets work when they're looking at gear. So the nature of it is that it'll sound like we're talking about being critical, but the reality is, and it's really important that we say this up front, this setup will absolutely work. That the idea that you need a 20-pound pack going on the Colorado Trail to somehow be successful, let me disabuse you of that idea, and let's instead talk about the ways we can sort of think about that future where we're going to make some adjustments. So I want to make sure that that's clear as well. And so here, Girl Plus Dog Adventures, I know her reasonably well. She had a 20-degree bag, puffy vest, and beanie, and it was perfect, but she had a 7.1 R value sleeping pad, and so she made that work. She also was using a freestanding, fully enclosed tent, which held in that heat well, and she did have a dog sharing the tent and space with her. But she is a proponent of carrying the gear that really works for you, and has a generally a heavier setup, especially because she's carrying stuff for her dog as well. So here, Calman wants to make sure that I'm not busting your gear too much. So thank
No,
you.
I honestly, I came on here to hear that, right? Like I am totally up for people telling me what's good, what's not good. I've packed and unpacked my bag so many times in the past like week. I think my dogs don't know if I'm coming or I'm going. Everyone's confused. Like I am here to hear it all. So I'm not taking personal offense to anyone's comments.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. But really, the key here is that these are. Well, I had a rougher experience years ago with a guy on the trail who, I believe in mansplaining, and I believe that I was mansplained through all of segment 10, and he made me crazy. And later on down the trail, somebody told me that he had actually told them how to filter water. Like 300 miles down the Colorado Trail, he thought this woman didn't know how to filter water. So I want to be real cognizant of that. That also that we're not just that we're making that part clear. So, all right, let's talk here. You've got the X Lite. That's 12 and a half ounces. That's, of course, one of the smallest sleeping pads you can get. So if we're talking on sheer element of sort of weight, we're dealing with something good there. But kind of to Details point from Girl Plus Dog, that's also one where in the math of it can also work out where if you get a warmer sleeping pad, you can often shrink your sleeping bag. And so there's some give and take there. I personally am taking should I be able to go? I'm going to take this one, the Xped. Oh, you know what? I forgot it's got the green screen. This is my favorite. So that's the Xped. That is just my absolute 3R. You can't see any of it except the writing on it. But this one is about 16 ounces, really comfortable, really small. R value of 3, but again, I sleep warmer, so that's not the end of the world, right? Now let's talk a little bit here about the bear can. It's the dreaded bear can conversation. What are we doing here?
This is safety for me. I will feel safer if I have this bear can with me. And so I know it is, it's heavy and it is not the best for packing. It's very awkward in a pack. But for me, I've gone back and forth, and actually my hiking buddy, my friend who's hiking with me, is not taking a bear can. Okay. She's taking a sack. And okay. So another thing too is I have tried to hang the sacks, hang the bear bags, and I am not the best at that either. And I'm anticipating I'm going to be pretty tired at the end of the day. And for me, it just seemed pretty convenient to be able to stash it somewhere. And that's that. And could also use it as a little seat. So, sure. That's my thing with the bear can. So I know a lot of people are for it.
So Salmon asked here, when you say bear bag, does that mean she's taking an Ursack or a bear bag?
She's taking an Ursack. Sorry. Okay, yeah.
Great. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about this one, because this is one I'm easily the most torn. I did pick up today in kind of thinking about it. I have my, hope it's not too green. I've got my food bag here. It's a great big giant one from Hilltop. It's got all my food for the first 4 days in here. Now here, I've got an Ursack. Now let's talk a little bit about why I'm sort of torn. So first thing is Ursack. This one I did a little bit of a video about food carrying storage options on the CT, and Ursack is currently suing the federal government, specifically in the Sierra Nevada, because they're not they're not actually safe for bears. And this is probably my hot take for the world. But I talked to a ranger who was doing the Sierra High route. She's a ranger in Sequoia National Park. And basically, what it is that when you take the ursack and you tie it to a tree, if a bear comes and bites it, they still get the flavor of the food. So they still get the reward. So it actually, Ursacks will actually ultimately lead to bears being more familiar with people than a bear canister. So I'm certainly on board with that. Now, of course, that's still probably better to them taking your food bag. But all the same, I had a hard time even buying the Ursac because the founder of Ursac is suing to make them legal in an area where we already know that it's going to be damaging to the bears. So I have a hard time with that. I know a lot of people are probably going to shred me in the comments. That's fine. But all the same, I have the food bag here for the counterbalancing, and I do have the string for doing that as well. It's not easy and it's not super fun. It's particularly not easy on a lot of the stretches of the CT because the trees are not really conducive for that. We don't have a lot of the branches that stick out like you would on the AT, where there are a lot of deciduous trees. They're a lot more evergreen, so it's very hard to safely hang it. So I totally hear you on that. It is one of the things where I think that's one where if safety is the game, the question would really be, in what way do we mean safety? Do you mean like the bear might get, so the bears aren't, if you have food that they can get to, they're not interested in you, right? So they're not going to come to your tent after raiding your food bag if they go get it. And so the safety there wouldn't necessarily be like bears, maybe they come through your camp or something. So I kind of get that part. The other piece of it is that it could be, it's an easy spot to consider shaving weight because you had mentioned it might be convenient, and absolutely it will be. And then the question is that few minutes of convenience at the end of the night worth it for the hours of inconvenience on the trail when you're hiking? And that's a decision everybody has to make. It's just one to kind of think over, because when you were thinking of my food bag there and the string, we're talking over a 2-pound weight reduction, right? And a space reduction. Again, I don't have hard feelings on this in any direction. We talked for a long time with Boogie, and he carried a bear canister last year. And when people show up with a bear canister, I'm all on board. I totally get it. What I might consider in this case, though, given your history of being an athlete, what I might consider is the idea of taking the 450, the BV 450, and then because of that, you would then be able to speed up your pace or do more stops in town. So pairing a smaller bear canister would shrink your weight, maintain that security, and then also make it a lot easier to pack. And then it would, if you, instead of taking 5 days of food, you take 3 with the expectation of stopping in Kenosha Pass, Breckenridge, Leadville, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there is some real advantage here. I also will point out here, bear cans are good when it rains too. And there's a credit card trick where basically what you do is you put the credit card over the tab, and that'll help it slide open. So it's a really good one.
Yeah, thanks for that, because I've seriously been practicing in my living room over and over, and I just get frustrated sometimes. So I'll definitely try that.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. And what she does is actually she takes Velcro and sticks a credit card to the top of the canister, so she always knows exactly where it is. So a little piece of Velcro, an old gift card from Applebee's, wherever your family, whatever fancy restaurant your family likes to send you to. But using the credit card will really speed up that process. But it is good when it rains as well. So again, for everybody watching, there's not, as long as the bears are safe, there's not a bad option. What I do try to encourage, though, at least with the Ursac, is if you are going to use the Ursac and the OpSac, I would recommend, when possible, still counterbalance hanging it, because I think that's the one way you can really try to do your best by the bears and make sure that they don't become familiar. I can also tell you that there are only 2 or 3 spots along the trail where bears have really been a major issue, and that typically most of the trail goes above the standard bear habitat, which is, according to the U.S. Forest Service, don't at me, everybody, bear territory, typically their range typically stops at about 8,900 feet. So you'll spend a lot of time above their normal territory. Are there bears above that? Probably. There are people, a lot of old white dudes on Facebook will show you all of their pictures of a bear at 12,000 feet. But Sorry, everybody. I'm turned into the old cranky white guy. That's what's happening here. But that being said, I think that overall bears are something you want to be mindful of, but they're not a big concern yet on the CT, and I hope we all keep it that way by taking good care of the food and such. And really, that's where we see them on the PCT going above that elevation is whenever they know there's food. So if we do a good job with that, and we can avoid what Salmon calls here the Everest bears. All right, let's talk here. Let's talk here a little bit about some more of the gear here. We've got a stove, so we are going with the stove here. Talk me through your decision to go with the stove instead of say stoveless or cold soaking. What's the story there?
Honestly, the story there is I don't know enough about cold soaking and the preparation, and that's really what it is. My husband, I'm actually using his pocket rocket, so we had it, and so that's why I went with it. It was just something I already had, and just kind of seemed easiest for me right now.
Yeah, that's that's it makes perfect sense. And this is one of the places where I did stoveless, which is basically a lot of tortillas and snack bars, that kind of thing, candy bars and dried fruit, that kind of thing. I am should I do the trail? Well, I keep mentioning this. I'm not sure. There's some things that are changing, and so not sure what's going on with the work situation. And there's a chance that maybe I don't make it on the trail this year. I hope still. I'll know in the next week, obviously. But I will. I am planning on going back to a stove. I've got this guy here. This one. I wouldn't recommend upgrading to it or changing to it. This is for anybody who knows. This is the BRS Hornet, and it's a $15 stove that's 25 grams, which is the size, and it's the size of a quarter. And I got this guy here. I got to tell you, I'm not in love with it. It is the MSR or the GSI. I love GSI stuff. It's the GSI Minimalist. And so it's got this sort of neoprene sleeve. So you got to put that on. And then it's got this little guy here. It doesn't have a handle, but it gives you this, which is side note. This is great for puppet shows around the campfire. So if you really want to like weird people out, you can be the guy doing puppet shows. But basically, this one here doesn't have a stove or a handle. But I will tell you, I took this to the Smokies last weekend, and you kind of have to dip your fingers into the food to be able to pull this out. So I'm not crazy in love with it. I might end up going with the Soloist because it has a handle on it and it's not that much heavier or larger. But for me, I figured that this is not that much weight to be able to open up a lot of options. And what I found with stoveless is that actually I was carrying more weight because I was carrying more stuff with not water in it, but like a bag of tortillas was heavier than for lunch each day, was heavier than carrying mashed potatoes and ramen for lunch each day with a stove, right? So I wasn't able to figure out a balance where I was carrying in stoveless options and still really saving weight because I had to carry stuff with a little bit of that water content in it already. So I'm going back to it. I'm not sure how I feel about the volume. That's the other thing. Kate, I don't know if you know, but I had an accident in 2006 where I broke my back. So I try to keep my weight as close to my back as possible. So the volume is really important. So I'm not loving this part here, but I think the setup here that you have outlined is pretty decent as well. Now let's talk a little bit about the water filtration. You're doing the Sawyer squeeze.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, going with the Sawyer, and then I know there's like a mini, right? Isn't there a mini?
There
Sawyer?
is.
And I'm going with the regular. I've heard mixed reviews about the mini, so that's why we also, when we camp, my husband has that's what we use, the Sawyer squeeze. So I got my own.
Yeah.
And so I'm sticking with it.
Yeah. So the Sawyer is actually, I was talking with my wife about this weekend, and Sawyer is losing their mind though. And so first of all, I love Sawyer's squeeze. I think that one is great. And the regular is absolutely the way to go. This was one that when they came out with it, I seriously I was teaching at a college with an outdoor leadership program, and I went to the director of it and I said, all other water filters are going to go out of business because they can't compete with this. Now, that was 6-7 years ago, and they had that Sawyer and the Mini. And here's the thing is they initially thought the Mini was going to be the big seller for ultralighters. So the prices were 20 for the regular that you're taking and 30 for the Mini. But then Dixie did a video where she froze her water filter in New Mexico on her CDT hike and complained that when she got to town, she was only able to find the mini. And that's when they flipped the prices. So the mini became 20, the regular
Mhm.
became 30, and now they're actually up to $39 for the regular at REI. I think it's a great one. I think it's a really good option. The one thing that everybody needs to know is there's a little white O-ring that goes on the where the connection is. Make sure you have the extra with it, and make sure that you get in the habit of checking that every time you take the Sawyer off, because it is super easy to lose. And I had my hike in 2019 on the CT. I had to bail and drink water unfiltered because I lost that little O-ring, and so it was not great. Now here's what I do have a question about though, Kate. I'm seeing 2 smart water bottles and the pouch to go with what you've got here. What's the word there?
Okay, so you're talking about like this the pouch that comes with the Sawyer squeeze, right?
That's right. Yep.
So that is for the dirty water. And then, right, isn't that? And then you squeeze it in. And
Oh.
then my
Yeah.
right, am I totally off? And then
No,
the
you're not totally off.
2 liters are my clean water, what I'm going to drink.
Yeah, so here's an easy place for a lot of people. So if you're going to carry that pouch, then I think that's fine. What I would do in this scenario, so what you actually will likely do with the Sawyer is you just screw it directly onto the smart water bottle. So you don't actually, so the pouch is really a pain to use. So what you do is you use the smart water bottle, get your water in it, you put the Sawyer on it, and then you're good. You just go straight from there.
Oh, you're saying like you drink it right from the filter?
Yep. Yep. So it's
Okay.
got the sport cap on it. And so it's going to be the same thing and you'll see them on smart water bottles everywhere. It fits just the same as the other bottle. And then you use that pouch should you need in, say, segment 27 has that big water carry that can be upwards of 14 miles. You might carry the pouch for that. But what I would do if you're sending resupply is I would include it in your resupply for that section, because 2 liters of water will be enough to get you through the dry stretch in segment 2. And so you might only need that pouch when you're later on down the trail. And so you might not need it, but very few people will filter from the pouch to a smart water bottle. Most people will just hook the Sawyer up to the smart water bottle and drink from there.
Gotcha.
And you'll see that a lot.
Good
It's
pro
just
tip.
something. What do you all think in the audience there? Any experience with that? Am I talking crazy? I'm also, side note, I'm doing the Aquamira drops because I got so frustrated with, I've had so many hikes destroyed or ruined by water purification, where I had an MSR, the pump, it got jammed with sediment. I had the O-ring fall off on my Sawyer at different points. I had the battery for the light one die on me. I'm just taking the drops. That's what I'm doing. Gonna do that, and I know I'm drinking chemicals, and probably it'll probably go nicely with the microchip from my vaccine, and that'll be just fine. I'm just kidding with that, by the way. All right, we never talked about this though, but what's the story with the paracord and the bear canister?
Yeah, so that paracord is for an emergency with like my tent or something. I figured just having extra cord to use like for my, you know how the tent has like a little to anchor it down, little it's just extra cord to have in case I need it. So I probably could cut that down a little bit. I don't think I need quite that much.
Yeah, I think that's probably the case. I think also, it's nice to know that there are other folks out there who are going to be a little bit anxious about something like this. So you'll likely be able to figure that out. The other thing that I would say in that respect is you could probably they call them survival bracelets. Do you know about those?
I don't.
They're the same paracord that people will weave into a bracelet, and you could take that and just clip it, and then basically you unravel it and it becomes it's just
Oh,
paracord.
wow.
And they're super inexpensive, but they also pack down nicely, and you kind of clip it to something sort of on the outside of your pack. I don't know. Let me know in the comments there, everybody, if you would carry that paracord out of nervousness or for an extra sort of something or other. My personal thought is I probably wouldn't, but I also it's not my hike, right? So it's an interesting one. How much did that end up weighing there, Kate?
I don't even know if I put that on there, to be honest.
Okay.
I don't think I think I forgot that. So add it on to the list of weight. Yeah, I'll have to look that one up and see.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd probably be fine without it. I think that 10 is pretty bulletproof, and you can also probably make something work kind of on the fly if need be, which would be an easy way to kind of shave a little bit of weight and space because that's a pretty bulky, a full roll.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? If you look with the tent, you can also have often you'll have an extra guy out cord with your tent already, or um, you can get something like these guys here. I got these just today. They're short, sort of patch kind of whatevers, and they're super small. This was about $12. What I'm pairing this with is my rain tarp poncho. So I'm going to carry the poncho and then these four guys. And that way, if it rains, I can set it up and do it as a tarp, that kind of thing. But this will be just a couple of grams. But these are the night eyes with the sort of these cinch clips. So that might be a good replacement because then you could use it for multiple stuff. Just an idea out there. I think we might have extra, but I think they're $12 at REI for the pack of four, which is it sets your mind at ease, but it also give you extra paracord that you could use for if you wash your clothes in the stream. You could also clip it up and do a clothesline to dry in the sun, that kind of thing. Now with the clothes here, I don't usually dig into a whole lot of the clothes because I think it's all pretty much it's very personal what people use, like what they're going to carry. I will say, just as a note and maybe a confession of sorts, that I use one of the things that I do when I go out on the trail is I carry a clean pair of socks for every day. Which is the biggest hiking sin I think I could make. So I got new socks. I'm going to do a thing where I carry a high end pair of socks and hike. Basically, each day I'm going to switch and then do a review 100 miles in each of the different pairs of socks, that kind of thing. But I carry a lot, and all that is to say that when I look over your list of gear, clothing wise, it looks like it's just fine, right? Any comments about the clothing list that we have here while we kind of take a look here? Salmon does not believe that I do a pair of socks for every day. So this is actually absolutely I do, and I've not had blisters in forever. And so I carry that fresh pair of socks every day. And because again, I went to a trekking pole setup. So I was able to reduce my boots down to hiking. I've got these trail runners, and that allowed me to shrink my socks. So I shrank my boots, my socks, my everything shrank as a result. Now let's talk a little bit here. Do you have any questions about your clothes, or do you have anything that you're not quite sure if you're going to stick with or swap out?
Wait, can I just clarify something? So how many socks total are you carrying?
I expect to spend no more than 5 days between towns. So I'm going to have 5 pairs of socks
Five
with me.
socks? Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So something that I just took out of my pack was a pair of rain pants.
Okay.
And so I did talk with you about that snack box. I decided, I know Colorado, there's going to be rain out on the trail, but I do have a pair of wind pants and they do dry pretty quick. And so I'm going to go with just those for this trip. I have my raincoat and I'll wear the wind pants. And so those rain pants were pretty big and baggy, and it was just kind of extra. So that's a subtraction I just recently made.
Yeah.
So
That's great. Yeah. I mean, I think that in my experience, I've not needed the pants, the rain pants, but the wind pants will be sufficient. And you can always toss up your tent if need be. There are two comments here. So this one actually might resonate with the women out there. Details took one and carried an extra to not have to put a cold one on in the morning. I think that's probably pretty sharp. I think that also kind of speaks to my socks situation where having a clean, dry pair of socks every day is helpful for sleeping well. If you're not going to carry as many socks as I have, then I also do recommend carrying one really comfy pair that you keep dry that's just for wearing around camp. I will say also that I carry, I'm looking here, you had the sandals somewhere. So what do we got here? Where did you have the sandals? What am I looking at here?
they're the zero.
Oh, the Zero X, the
Yeah.
Z Trail.
Yeah.
This is an easy spot where I got these guys. I think they're probably an ounce each, and I got them from the Dollar Tree. And if they get torn up on trail, I don't care. These are an easy ones. You have to get the ones that are real flimsy. But let me talk through my decision making if I were you. if you're planning on using those sandals for creek crossings and that kind of thing, then the ones you have are perfect, right? Specifically because they're not going to come off your feet when you're crossing a stream and sort of the water pushes under them. I think 10 ounces is also not that much about that. But anyway, I think that is a spot where you could probably shave half a pound pretty easily, especially because if you have these cheap ones here, you can also sort of clip them to the outside of your pack and not worry if they get ripped off, that kind of thing. And they have all sorts of fun ones that come out in the holiday time. But ultimately, a lot of people are saying that a lot of people are saying that the clothes are looking really solid here. That what they see, Everyday Backpacker actually works in an outdoor gear shop, and so he's familiar with all the brands that you're putting up there, and says that this looks great. And then Sam, it also says the clothes all look great. So here, I'd also like to point out that Team Socks Every Day, that's making a rally here. And then here we're in good shape here. All right, so let's go to this next one here. We're going to talk about some of these other the other pieces of gear that you have. We do have a sit pad. So you mentioned a sit pad. This is one that I think absolutely keep it. Have you used the sit pads before on your other trips? Is this a new addition for you?
This is a new addition, just from all of my research and everyone I follow that's through hiking. It's like everyone has these sit pads. And it's so light, and it's just like the little, just a tiny. Everyone says go with the sit pad.
Yeah,
so this is purely from popular.
Yeah. Well, tell us what you think in the comments there, everybody. But I agree. I put a sit pad into. I thought I would never be that person, and then I started carrying one when I got to Breckenridge in 2020, and I never go anywhere without it. It makes a world of difference. It is one of the things that if you're using the Bear canister, it's less useful or less comfortable unless you pair it and kind of have the sit pad. If you lay the Bear canister on its side and then put the sit pad by it and kind of use it that way, you can be pretty useful there as well. But I think that's pretty decent too. Now we've got the data book there. That's a great addition, by the way, everybody. If you don't have the data book, let me tell you, fun fact, if you don't have the data book, get the data book and then go to the Facebook page where everybody is asking questions about the CT. And I promise you, no fewer than 70% of them can be answered by turning to a certain page in the data book. It's worth every ounce that you're carrying, and especially learning to read it will really help you in terms of when you're on trail. It'll let you know how much water you need to carry, and it will also show you on the little water graphics that they show, it will show you the likelihood that there's water. So it'll be a full cup of water if it is full cup of water if it's definitely going to be running, and it will be less and less as it becomes more scarce. So you can kind of gauge it. So kind of to the point here where Jeff mentions he's going to start on the 23rd. For Jeff starting on the 23rd as opposed to Kate who's starting sometime next week, right? Basically, when you look at a glass that's half full, you can probably go without carrying that water, right? Because you know that the likelihood early season for it to be there. Whereas Jeff starting later in the season, as his hike progresses, if he sees half a cup of water, he probably needs to think through, like, there's a better likelihood that there's not water. It's also a great way to pair it with the Far Out app, what used to be called Gut Hook, to make sure that you have the sort of the water that you need and securing and making sure that you're looking ahead and know where that next water is coming from as well. Do you have any, in terms of the electronics, why don't you talk us through what your decisions were with the electronics there as well?
So, I think it's pretty minimal here with what I'm bringing. My phone, the charger I'm bringing, for like when I'm like a wall charger, right? So when I'm in town, pretty much fits a lot of the different electronics that I have. So it's just one cord for all. I don't know about the headphones. I might take those out, to be honest. They'll probably just bring them for the plane and mail them back or something. But yeah, I'm taking the InReach, the Garmin InReach, and I know Snackbox, we talked a little bit about that before. For me, that's definitely, safety. I'll definitely be checking in with my parents every night and my husband, just letting them know I'm safe. Yep. Gosh, what else is on there? My watch. I love to have my little Garmin watch with me. It also has a little a little trail map, like a little GPS. So I'm hoping the trail will come up on that. And then I just have the battery charger. So hopefully, if I'm low on anything, I can just charge on the trail.
Gotcha. And the battery charger, where's that one on the list? Jody here, this is George, but he goes by Jody, was curious about the battery bank. So, do you have a battery bank? Is that what you were mentioning?
That's what I mean by that. Yeah, battery
Okay.
bank.
Which item is that one?
I put it as battery charger.
Okay, gotcha. Battery
But I
charger.
think that's
It looks like the
it's
1
more
ounce
than
might
one
just be
ounce.
yeah.
It's definitely more than 1 ounce.
Well, I mean, I've got one here, and I think I'll be carrying it as well. But these are super heavy. They can, in my experience, so I'm torn on this one, by the way. So I'll just talk you through sort of where I sit on this one. With my current schedule, the way I've got it outlined, I'll have a source of battery power every 5 days at the most, right? And so with that, your cell phone will actually hold a charge as long as you do a couple of things. This goes for everybody. What you want to do is make sure it's on airplane all the time, and you might turn it on at mountain passes. So when you get to Georgia Pass, for example, Kenosha Pass, you can get some cell service there, but the rest of the time you won't have it. So you can even check it real quick, turn it off of airplane. But as long as you do that, your battery should hold up for most people the length of 5-6 days, because you're not going to have much use. Now, it will determine, it will affect how you're able to use, say, music. If you want to listen to music, that'll often do it. I like to listen to podcasts. So it is a little bit where what I do typically is I don't listen to podcasts the first few days so that I can kind of turn it down, or I take a couple of songs that I know for morale, which is important for everybody. Take something you can listen to when your morale starts to tank a little bit. And for everybody here, it will tank at some point. You will have a low day. No matter how excited you are, no matter how much work you did, you're going to have a low day or a low time. So knowing that if that's something that cheers you up, it's worth it. In my experience, though, I've not had to use the battery bank, even with all my cameras, even with all, like, I carried a drone in 2020. I'm going to carry a drone this year. That the battery bank is not necessarily necessary for most people, especially if you're hiking a pretty quick pace. And there are often people who are willing to share, say, their satellite charger. Jerry from Tangent Trails also offers that setting your screen lighting low. That's really helpful. But I think to the bigger point here, again, everything looks normal. I'm not looking at anything at this list where I'm like, I don't understand why you need 3 knives and a hatchet and two tanks of propane, right? And I did carry 4 canisters of fuel when I did the collegiate loop, so 4 in my backpack the whole time. So I know what that's like. The pack looks great too. We've got the Hyperlight Mountain Gear pack, and let's talk a little bit here about toiletries. We've got the Wilderness wipes are an interesting choice there with 3.5 ounces, and the toothpaste travel size for toothbrush. I think that looks great. What I have seen people do though, Kate, is to use a dehydrator or even sun dry the wipes and then rehydrate them on trail. So I think you could lose a few ounces that way. Bigger question is it really worth it, all the effort to lose a couple of ounces? I don't know. Salmon does say the list looks solid here. So we're in pretty good shape with that. What some people do is what Salmon mentioned here, the toothpaste tablets. Are you familiar with these?
No, I'm not actually.
So these are new. These are a new thing I just tried them. Some people love them, some people hate them. So by all means, I would recommend trying them. But they are these tablets. They're like this big, right? And so they're tiny, tiny things. And you put them in your mouth, you crunch them, and then you brush your teeth, and they work. And so they're just like carrying toothpaste, but they don't spill. They don't get messy. I like them fine enough, but I also am a bit of an animal when I'm out there. So a lot of people might not. And then here, Girl Plus Dog mentions that the wipes in general are worth it. So certainly sounds like you've got a lot of votes in favor there. I personally will carry deodorant as well. I know this is probably up there with my socks, but I'll carry deodorant, and I find that it makes a difference for how I feel, again, kind of getting into that mentality. Do you have anything on this list here that you were like sort of waffling on or thinking, what do you think? Are you sort of certain on this? Are there any different changes that you might make? And also here, the people who gave us the tip, these are Mad Hippies Life. They were the ones who gave me the tip about the uh, dehydrating the wipes. So if you do that, I would do that all in one fell swoop and then mail them with your resupply should you choose to do that. But tell us a little bit about your toiletries. Are you pretty locked in? Any changes?
Yeah, I think I think I'm pretty locked in. I had some other things that I did take out, like I'm not bringing my hairbrush. So there's definitely been things that I've taken out as I've packed and repacked. And so, I think for comfort and for just like you said, feeling good on the trail enough to keep moving on every day. Um, I think maybe just the razor I might take out. Um, but everything else I think is what I'll take.
Are you doing resupply boxes or are you just going to
I'm not
resupply in town?
just in town. So I guess I could
Okay.
always buy a disposable razor when I get to shower up in a town.
Yeah, that's what I've done in the past because I get just my facial hair just makes me crazy in town. So I'll actually be sending along I have an old beard trimmer I'm going to send along halfway just so I can whatever's making me insane, I can sort of trim it down. Here, uh, she can't do toothpaste tabs because she looks like she has rabies. Can confirm, and then yeah, what I here's one of the ones that I certainly this is probably I'm going to put this out to everybody. Here's the one thing that I feel like I would definitely take off the list is the you had the deuce of spades, and then let me show you here. We've got it sort of tucked away. Where do we have it sitting? So the deuce of spades is this green guy here. It's your shovel, your camp trowel. And let
Yeah.
me talk you through why I would. But again, this is a hot take, and people are probably going to shred me in the comments, but they're going to have to live with it. In my experience, those just don't dig. They just you can't get any earth. The ground is too dry. It's too hard. So what I do when I'm out there is I'll find a sharp rock that works fine. There are a few rocks you can find them if you look closely. Sometimes you have to search around, but I'm just teasing about that. There are rocks everywhere, but you can get a rock that will work plenty sufficiently. You can use your trekking poles to dig. Now, what I will yeah, so this was also Girl Plus Dog Adventures sort of seconds that. That's why I married her because she backs me up on all of my crazy hot takes, right? Didn't like the deuce of spades, too many rocks or roots, but she does have a trick that I want to share with everybody that's also important. When she would get to camp, when she was doing her hike last year, she dug her cat hole for the next morning the night before, which to your point about the bear canister being about safety and comfort, I can tell you that there's nothing better than when you wake up in the morning and it's already there and ready to go. But it's just one of those things. But I do think that you can use rocks to do that. You can find sharp sticks, that kind of thing. But it doesn't really save you a lot of weight. So what I would also do in your specific case is I would carry it to Breckenridge and see what you think, but have it sort of high on your radar. So I would put maybe the battery bank high on your radar and the deuce of spades, and then also any of the other items. Maybe even carry that paracord. And if you get to Breckenridge and you decide you don't need it, no harm, right? You can ship it back. It's not a big deal. But again, what's nice about your list there, Kate, is that you have it so set up already that it's fine, right? So you know that it's going to work. And now what you have is sort of you have 85% of the way to the perfect setup. And so as you go down the trail, you're going to be able to sort of dial in at different places and start figuring out what works for you and what doesn't. But overall, I think you're probably pretty well set. Do you have any specific questions about gear before we turn over to the sort of? I want to make sure that we have time to talk about the idea that we had talked about before. Um, any questions about gear or any thoughts about the gear that we haven't covered yet for you?
I guess the only thing, and I don't know if I don't think it was on that list. Bear spray. I'm wondering how people feel about that because it is a bit heavier to be carting around. And so I'm kind of up in the air. I don't have it here. If I do have it, I'll buy it when I'm in Colorado because I don't think you can bring them on planes.
Yeah.
So yeah, just that's kind of my only thing.
Yeah, I mean it's a tough one. Again, I can tell you my thoughts on it, but my, the opinions are like butts. Everybody's got one and they usually stink, right? But I mean, I don't think it's worth it personally. I think that generally speaking, you put yourself far more at risk for accidentally spraying yourself. I do know people who have carried it. I know one specifically here. She took it through segment 16 and then ended up leaving it. I haven't seen enough bears in Colorado. I've seen in my time out there, I've seen two, uh, and so I don't see them frequently enough. I think you're far more. The bigger concern, I think, for most people will be things like raccoons, porcupines, mice. I've seen mice give people a lot of grief, pikas, that kind of thing. But I think generally, this could be the kind of thing. What I would do is, in that case, is I would actually hike to Breckenridge. And if you feel safe by Breckenridge, then I would go on. But if not, there is an REI in Dillon that you can scoop some. My guess is that you're going to be fine without it and not need it. But all the same, if it comes down to safety, you could buy it in REI in Denver and then return it at REI in Dillon. And so I think that that's fine. I will say here that here. Mad Hippies do carry one, and they do a lot more hiking in Colorado than me. That they're pretty active with it. So in a sense, I would say, um, I would I would say make a decision based on what you think is best. But personally, I wouldn't. But Mad Hippies would, and I respect what they have to say about everything quite a bit. So weigh those as you will. And again, it's all about kind of figuring out what makes you feel comfortable and safe, and then knowing that eventually you might feel more comfortable or safe otherwise. Now let's talk for here. Oh, Jeff here. Actually, this is probably where I would sit too, Jeff. I'm glad you said that. I would carry it in grizzly country, not for black bears. I did a lot of. Um, I chased a black bear out of my campsite on the John Muir Trail, and my heart didn't even get pumping because at that point I was so familiar with what to do. Somebody told me to treat them like big raccoons, and it made me feel a lot more comfortable. I've had bears come into my shelter on the AT before. I've had different experiences like that. But here, to Kirk's point, and I want to share this: what you're comfortable with for sure. So it's really about your personal comfort level and knowing. I think in my mind, knowing that you could buy it in Denver, returned in Breckenridge, should you think it's unnecessary, that would give me a lot of comfort as
It,
well.
it works on crazy humans too, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point there too, that this is, we had talked about that a little bit, that here, this is for me, I don't necessarily worry a whole lot about crazy humans, but I'm also a dude. And so I think that it is something that could give you that added measure of security. And there are people who do them. Now there are other options too, with like an air horn and, for the bears, et cetera. But yeah, so I'll be curious. Just report back. Let us know eventually what you think about, or what you end up deciding on that one. I'll be curious to see, and also kind of thinking about like where your parents fit in. If you're checking in with them, then obviously you're pretty close with them, and what would make them feel better, because you don't go on a hike by yourself. People come with you. Now, Kate, we had talked beforehand. We had talked, and I know we're running somewhat low on time, but I think we probably have about 10 minutes or so, which is probably specific. It's helpful here. The mental shakedown. So this is the sort of the mental clutter and stress and everything that goes with it. Let's talk a little bit about, and so you work as a counselor. I think we talked. That's okay to say. So what have you been doing to get ready mentally for this hike, to make sure that your brain is in the place it needs to be to hike the trail?
Yeah, so I've stopped watching bear attack videos and mountain lion. Stopped watching those videos recently. And so, no, but in all seriousness, I'm kind of approaching this honestly as I would one of my races.
Okay.
So I'm harnessing that normal anxiety, right? And that anxious feeling as like a good, healthy thing. And I'm just trying to get excited and think of the end goal. Trying to stay positive and just envision, how will I feel when I hit my first 100 miles on the trail? How will I feel when I finish the trail, right? How confident and strong and proud. And so, those moments of doubts definitely creep in, and I think that's normal. And I try to kind of take it with a grain of salt and just make sure I am up to date with all my safety things and just make sure I'm, confident in that way when those worries come in, but just try to get excited about it. And yeah.
Yeah, so I want to highlight a couple of things that I think are really pertinent for people who are heading out on the trail. The first is it's normal to be anxious, right? That is really typical. In fact, John Steinbeck has a great quote where he says that there are two types of people: those who set out looking for adventure, hoping to find it, and those who set out for adventure, hoping they won't, right? And so it's certainly normal to feel this anxiety. But what I appreciate about your approach is that if you start looking ahead, right? So you start trying to envision what it's going to be like, you can get a lot of that preparation out of the way. So taking a few minutes for everybody thinking about doing a hike like this. And what I want you to think about are things like, all right, how good is it going to feel when I get to that 100-mile mark, right? And start making that turn. And this trail is one where the geography of it and the climbs are such that I believe really confidently if you can make it to that 100-mile mark, you're likely to finish, because that first 100 miles I would put up against any other 100 miles of the trail in terms of sheer difficulty, right? And so here it is a really important sort of landmark, but also being ready for it mentally to celebrate those wins. Because I think when we think about anxiety, we think about ourselves out there not doing reaching the mountaintop, right? We think about the idea of failure, but really starting to think, all right, now I'm nervous, but how good is it going to feel when I see Breckenridge or hear, that look over Georgia Pass, right? That is for me what I would be ready for. If you want, I think I might have mentioned it in the video, that have something to celebrate that milestone specifically, because it's really important and it's a really big moment for a lot of people. So being ready to celebrate those wins and knowing that you are going to be a problem solver, you're going to sort this out. I'd also say, for me mentally, envisioning some of those days where you're bored, right? Which is big, or your feet hurt and you still have miles to go. Maybe you have a blister that's sore, knowing that that's all part of it. Knee pain, any of those things, being homesick, that's important. Having a plan in place to sort of deal with that and know that it's normal and kind of keep pushing forward is big. But knowing, this might not be the nicest thing to say, but knowing that people who are less athletic than me have done it is helpful for me. And knowing that people who are not as smart as me have done it is helpful, because what that tells me is that I can figure this out, right? There's nothing magical about it. I think that's also a big piece for people, that when you're thinking about this, I think it's really, really important for everybody to know that there's nothing magical about this, right? The hike experience is magical, but there's nothing that's so mysterious we can't figure it out. It is ultimately just walking, but it's very simple. It's just making sure that you're putting in those miles and the hours. And so as long as you're focused on that one immediate task, you're going to be okay, but be ready for some of those lows. Jerry here points out, this is my favorite tip. I don't know if you know this one or not, Kate, but I also recommend everybody carry a really good bar of chocolate that you only eat when your morale tanks, right? And if you're hiking, so you're hiking with a partner. And so my rule when I'm hiking with a partner is you don't decide when you eat your chocolate, your partner does. Because
Nice.
when they start seeing you get hangry or cranky or whatever, and it's also kind of the point here is, and I think you'll appreciate this on some level, is that the point is when somebody tells you to eat chocolate, it means that you have this sort of point of connection, right? You have this point where somebody's caring for you and looking out for you, just to remind you, like, I'm in this too, we're together. So that it's not really about the chocolate, right? You could have anything where it's like a bag of Skittles or whatever. I think it works better with chocolate because of the caffeine, but that moment where you know that you're doing this thing with somebody, I think is an important piece for that. But having a sense of how you're going to celebrate, having a sense of where you're going to struggle, and then being ready to be proud of the places where you are, where you're making those big victories. Just as a note here for Jody, the chocolate, weirdly enough, if it's deep enough in your pack, won't melt. And so what you have to be careful for in Kate's case, should she decide to take chocolate, just when the bear canister is out, as long as it's not in the direct sunlight, it will stay just fine for your entire hike. It's the weirdest thing, because it could be 95 degrees outside, and as long as it's in your pack, it will not melt. It's a great question, though.
Rochelle, you have to bring the chocolate. My hiking buddies, I can see her in the comments here.
Oh, is this Rochelle? Is that your hiking buddy?
Yeah. Hear that, Rochelle? Get us some chocolate bars.
Yeah, and I mean Rochelle here talking about movement form of meditation. I think that's helpful too, or just that mindfulness, and being aware of the little things can be really helpful because that can really be it can be great whenever you start noticing the smaller things and also noticing some of those feelings. So one of the things that I've heard from a lot of through hikers is that after a few days, you start like these memories or even feelings that you haven't processed before start bubbling up. And so it's a place where because it's kind of like when you're in an airplane, you know how people cry often at movies and airplanes when they don't in normal life. Do you know this phenomena?
I mean, I always cry on airplanes, but I also always cry in movies in my living room. So
Oh, yeah, there's this thing. You can look it up. I promise it's real. But people who don't cry normally will cry on airplanes, at movies, at weird moments. But the science is suspected that it's because everything is reduced down to just that person in the screen. So they don't have any distractions and they're not able to. So they sort of get into this mental space. That's at least my theory on it. But I think that when you're hiking, because your cell phone is automatically going to disconnect, you start connecting with nature in a way that your sort of body connects with sleep and the sun and moon. And I mean, I sound a little bit hippie here, but at the same time, I also can tell you that the sun will wake you up and sunset will put you to sleep by the end of week one. So your body does fall in rhythm with that nature. But I think you start processing a lot of feelings and memories and you'll think of things on trail that you haven't thought of in 25, 30 years if you're an old man like me, right? So just being ready for that and being aware and paying attention to it can be kind of fun. It can be difficult at points too. You can take a journal. Somebody asked me about this. I think taking 5 or 6 sheets of paper and maybe some envelopes and you can mail them back to yourself is often good. Any way you want to do it. My mom has a trick that I like to tell people, and when I start getting cranky or feeling down, she tells me to name 3 things I'm grateful for. And so that in my mind sort of works because it takes your attention away from the sort of navel gazing, which is in a sense, I think it works a lot better than self-care, because I think sometimes when we talk about that sort of self-care, we start thinking of like, how do I make this thing about me even more about me? And instead, I like the idea that we start thinking about the things that we have that are positive. So I'm not trying to hate on self-care too much, but I do think that there's a space for both, where we think about how we look at our own situation, but how we look beyond our situation to other people. So I think that there are a lot there. You have something too?
well, I was going to say, I'm reading that book. I think you recommended it. It was Uphill Both Ways.
That's right. Yeah.
And so that's kind of getting me
Yeah.
excited. And it's part of this mental shakedown, right? It's like prepping me. But the author points out, in those moments where she's feeling overwhelmed or kind of out of her body, noticing just the little things, right? Grounding and noticing like this butterfly or the beautiful flower that's right in front of you. And so I find peace in that myself, like just like, the animals that join us along the way, or, just looking for those specific things that bring me comfort that can kind of just bring me back.
Yeah. I
When I'm
love
feeling
that.
overwhelmed. So I know like that's something like that, just that balance, right? Between being present and then also forward thinking when you need that at times.
That's right. Yeah.
I
And
thought that was really beautiful.
I thought she was on here a couple of weeks ago, and that book is incredible. So, for those of you who haven't gotten it yet, it's Uphill Both Ways: Hiking Toward Happiness on the Colorado Trail by Andrea Lani. And it's just, I mean, it's beautifully written. And I say that quite sincerely, that I've read hundreds and hundreds of books, and it's just beautifully written. It's really nicely done. So, pick up a copy of that one. If you forget the name of that, you can send me a message on Instagram. I'll be happy to send that along. But I think that idea of grounding is helpful I mean, kind of pun intended, but if you're unfamiliar with this idea, there's a really easy way to go about it, and that's to just sit and take a minute and fill in your 5 senses. So what do you smell? What do you see? What do you taste, touch, and hear? And in nature, it can be really powerful for kind of getting your brain out of these sort of ruts, which I'm certainly prone to as well, or feeling overwhelmed. But it's a good thing to have in your pocket just in general, right? So you don't have to be doing that when you're overwhelmed. You can do it. I would do it when you go to sleep at night. It can be nice to kind of reflect on that and think about how peaceful it is. And I think that's an important one. I'm glad that you mentioned that piece. And here Matt Hippie's mentioned, and I think this is really kind of a good cap for this sort of segment here. The further you go, the more you learn about yourself and what you're truly capable of. You'll be amazed at your victories. And I want people to really, anybody watching this taking off on the trail, I want you to think about this. Think about your victories, because you are going to have plenty of losses. You're going to have things break. You're going to have things you didn't plan on that pop up. That's normal. And it's certainly, there will be problems you have to deal with, but that is only part of the story. That's sort of like, it's like looking at a cheesecake and only talking about the calories, right? But what about the good things, right? So talk about the good parts of it. Really focus on those victories and the places where you do something that you didn't realize you were capable of, and you will by all means do that. The last piece that I like to mention with the mental part of it is, I always want to mention to everybody, your mileages will increase as you go. And so the first half of the trail is so super hard for myriad reasons. Your body isn't quite ready. Your pack is heavier than it's going to be the whole trail. And the climbs and the terrain are different and difficult in their own unique ways at the start of the hike. So even if you are putting out an Excel spreadsheet and I know exactly where I'm camping every night, and you fall behind that, don't get discouraged. Know that you're going to make up those miles, because whatever spreadsheet you have is going to become effectively worthless after the first thunderstorm, because you're going to get backed up, and that's fine. You're going to make up those miles. It's going to be fine. Just keep your head down, do those miles, and enjoy the moment while you're there. So keep us posted on that. Now, Kate, I want to talk a little bit. I want to mention first, I want to talk a little bit about you're doing part of your hike, and you're working on a bit of a personal project here. You're going to be, as a part of your hike, fundraising for the Girls on the Run of Northern Arizona. Talk us through a little bit about what they do, what this organization is all about, and how you plan to contribute through your hike.
Yeah, thank you. So, Girls on the Run, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with it, but it is a national program. And so it's basically for elementary age and middle school girls, or people who identify as female or non-binary. And so it's a running program that focuses on building up to a 5K. So it's really beautiful. You get to watch these people build their running skills, build their endurance, and it has a social emotional curriculum that goes along with it. And so that focuses on confidence and coping strategies, possible or positive coping strategies. It focuses on body image. So all those really important topics that I think we all can relate to and wish we had some more tools in our toolbox. So it's hitting those those kids at a young age. And so I've coached for a number of years when I worked at elementary school, and now I'm on actually the board for Northern Arizona. And so to help that, what I'm doing is every 100 miles, I'm going to donate $20 to Girls on the Run of Northern Arizona. And so I'm hoping that some more people will get on board with that. I think that'll be helpful for me, just for some extra motivation out on the trail. I'm doing this for myself, but it's also something greater than me too. And so I'll have some more information. My Instagram is on here. So if you want to follow along and see where Rochelle and I are at, that's awesome. And if you do, no pressure, but if you do want to participate with the Girls on the Run for donating some money, that would be great too.
That's great. So just to make sure we've summed this up just a little bit, be sure you follow Kate on Instagram at KA and there'll be more information coming in the next day or two about specifically how you can play a part in this. So if you do have the means to be supportive financially of this organization, then she's going to have some links that will come out. I think it sounds great. I recently started training for a marathon, which is way outside of my wheelhouse, but I ran my first 5K. And I think that, that sense of confidence is certainly a really important thing that can come from sort of these challenges. I never thought I could run the distances that I've started putting in. And I think that sounds like really great work, especially for people who, when you're younger, it can really hit hard and at some of those difficult ages. So giving something to kind of, giving these girls something to do that will be strength building physically and mentally, I think is dynamite. So I'm glad that you're doing that. Do send along a link. I'd love to be supportive in it in any way that I can. Great. So now the less serious stuff. And then we're going to call this day in just a couple of minutes, everybody. If you are launching on July 1st, really common launch date, or if you're just out there in Denver, we are doing a launch party at Races Brewing June 30th at 7 p.m. It'll be about 7 to 9 p.m. Races Brewing. And so come on out and say hello, and then be watching the Facebook group if you're following the Facebook group through hiking. My hope is people will be able to sort of work on getting a shuttle to the trailhead the next morning together as a result of that. So we'll see how that goes. But just plan on coming out if you're able. And even if you're not hiking it, or if you're just here and want to be part of the community, we'd love to have you show up for that. And then finally, well, what did I have here? Well, so be sure to like and subscribe, obviously, but I want to share this other one here from Rochelle Telemann. Such a positive role model. Couldn't agree more. I think that's terrific. Kate, thank you for your time. Do you have a trail name yet?
No trail name.
All right.
Hopefully it'll organically form, right?
Yep, absolutely. So check back in with us after the hike. Let us know how it goes. Be posting pictures on Instagram. We'll all look forward to hearing about that. Thank you so much for your time. This has been really great.
Thank
and
you.
For all the gearheads out there, I'm sure they've had a great time. Thank you, everybody out there. Kate, I'm gonna have you in the green room here. I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody, and then I'll say goodbye to you shortly. All right, everybody. Well, that covers it. I want to reiterate a couple of last things here. The first thing is, know that these gear decisions are personal. So whatever you decide, make sure it works for you. And also, sort of in keeping with that, when you talk with other people, be sure that you just appreciate the fact that people are hiking their own hike. You might make different choices than them, and that's totally fine. So everybody, as long as we are taking care of the environment that we love, and as long as we are being safe out there, then who cares what somebody else is camping with or hiking with? Be out there, help everybody out, take care of each other. And if you haven't already, be sure you get in touch with your father or father figure, or any fathers or father figures, and tell them thank you for their contributions they've made in this world. Take care, everybody. This is Snackbox out.